Hi, everybody. Dr. Dan Lawrence here talking about rhetoric and specifically the sophists today and adding some nuance and complexity to the sophists who were teachers for hire that Socrates took issue with. This is the kind of simple way to differentiate between the sophists and the Socratic philosophers who came after. Socrates apparently took no pay for his work. The sophists were sort of teachers for hire, teachers of rhetoric, of philosophy, of poetry. And of course, Plato then very famously takes up issue with the sophists in his dialogue Protagoras, and then and others as well, and centrally in the dialogue Phaedrus. Plato's whole philosophy of rhetoric, his whole conception of rhetoric, is built around this attack against the sophists, because Plato is saying, look, you can't just go around teaching people how to be great speakers without instilling in them a sense of philosophy, a sense of ethics. You must first be a great thinker, then you may speak. First think about what you're going to say, essentially, at great depth, of course. Now, the problem is that the sophists, I do not think, from my readings, were so simple. Of course, it's impossible to reduce a group of people to any kind of label. We're generalizing even by creating this term sophist. Of course, there was a lot of diversity of thought, and there were many different thinkers. But when we actually read the texts of Protagoras, the thinker, the human, or we read the text of Gorgias, there's a lot of complexity, there's a lot of nuance, there's subtlety. So I want to demonstrate a little bit of that for you through looking at, we're going to start with Protagoras, and I'm reading from Williams here, the James Williams Classical Rhetoric Anthology. So we just have some snippets. Let me start with a fragment from Protagoras. Famous, you see this quoted everywhere. Man is the measure, and we would say the human is the measure. Man is the measure. Here's Protagoras. Of all things the measure is man, of things that they are, and of things that are not, that they are not. And there's a great clash with Plato's philosophy here, right? Because for Plato, it's the ideal forms. It's that your soul came into contact with the ideal forms. Nowhere on earth is there a perfect circle. We can envision a perfect circle because there's something out there, something in the metaphysical realm that is the perfect circle, and our soul came into contact with it, and so on. This isn't about Plato's philosophy. That's a really quick, reductive way of summarizing this idea of the ideal forms. For Protagoras here, of all things the measure is man, of things that they are, and of things that are not, that they are not. Does this sound like someone who's just a trickster, just trying to deceive? Here we go again with another fragment of Protagoras' writing on the gods. About the gods, Protagoras writes, about the gods I'm not able to know whether they exist or do not exist, nor what they are like in form. For the factors preventing knowledge are many, the obscurity of the obscurity of the subject, and the shortness of human life. That seems to be a very existential, a kind of very proto-existential, because existentialism, as we understand it, doesn't emerge until thousands of years later in France with thinkers like Camus and that whole kind of Nietzschean tradition. But here you have the obscurity of the subject and the shortness of human life. I'm not able to know. It's a kind of atheistic stance in a culture where it's very dangerous to not profess faith in the gods. In fact, this is one of the accusations against Socrates that he is eventually put to death for, is blasphemy of not believing in the gods. So Protagoras here, showing, again, depth, complexity. Here's Protagoras, who was a sophist, from that traditional definition of, okay, he took payment for his teaching. Socrates did not. For if a man is not likely to be guilty of what he is accused of, for instance, if being weak he is accused of assault and battery, his defense will be that the crime is not probable. But if he is likely to be guilty, for instance, if he is strong, it may be argued again that the crime is not probable, for the very reason that it was bound to appear so. It is the same in all other cases, for a man must either be likely to have committed a crime or not. Here both the alternatives appear equally probable, but the one is really so, the other not probable absolutely, but only in the conditions mentioned. And this is what making the worse appear the better argument means. And of course, this is something that Plato takes up, as accusing the sophists of making weaker causes seem the greater, which is then tied to his ideas about truth. He says that, to do rhetoric properly, first you must figure out what the best cause is. And we carry this with us today, making arguments for the right things. To find truth, you must look at every angle of a subject, and we might have incomplete information, and to seek out the best possible sources and to evaluate the evidence and so on. So we'll go to Gorgias then quickly, another sophist in that traditional sense of, seem to belong of a kind of class of thinker, philosopher in ancient Greece, who were teachers for hire. Gorgias has many important contributions to ancient thought that we still carry with us. Kairos, this idea that rhetoric is bound by time, or that there are opportune moments to do and say certain things. Certainly this was the case, this big example I keep using of Hitler. It's like the conditions had to be primed for someone like Hitler to be persuasive, right? You needed those really harsh sanctions from the Treaty of Versailles after World War I. You needed this kind of a population that could have been radicalized for them to be persuaded. Kairos is about timing, thinking about big moments, as well as when are you going to run your advertisement? Is it going to be most effective if you do it at a certain time of the year? And those are all ways of thinking about how time can be related to persuasion. It's kairos and chronos. Okay, so Gorgias, though, we have a couple fragments here I'll read then. Gorgias, first and foremost, this is on the non-existent. First and foremost, nothing exists. Second, even if it exists, it is inapprehensible to man. Third, even if it is apprehensible, still it is without a doubt incapable of being expressed or explained to the next man. Now, Gorgias, you remember at the end of the Encomium of Helen, is saying, maybe this whole thing was just a diversion for me. So Gorgias is kind of, he has a humor to him, right? Also a seriousness, self-reflection, introspection, meta-rhetorical thinking, but a little bit, we think he might be playing around with these, playing around a little bit here, having fun a little bit. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Philosophy can be fun. Rhetoric can be fun. Intellectual and academic work can be fun. Okay, I better wrap this up here, trying to keep this under 10 minutes. I'm reading a little bit from the James Williams anthology and thinking about the complexity of the sophists. Plato takes up arms against the sophists in his famous dialogue Phaedrus that we read in depth, and it establishes the basis for his claims about the necessity of relating truth to rhetoric and coupling philosophy with rhetoric. But again, it's just not that simple. It's not clear to me that thinkers like Protagoras, like Gorgias, were so single-sided. I think they were contributing important ideas in this, this buildup of the canonical Western tradition, as some say. And I think that there's a lot of richness there still to develop. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of those sophistic texts at length that we can read. We do have fragments, and then we have secondhand accounts and tertiary accounts and different things we can kind of piece together to get a better picture of what their lives were like. But certainly there's validity, right? You can see why Plato is upset Williams makes the case that Plato may have even been felt personally a kind of a vengeance because of the death of Socrates. The death of Socrates, this happens essentially from false accusations, from the persuasion that occurs in the courts. And of course, that's detailed in great length, or at least Plato's perspective on it is detailed in great length in the dialogue Apology and in other places. So there we go. We'll keep this under 11 minutes. Good luck, everybody. A little bit of nuance for you about the sophists and about classical rhetoric. Take care of yourself.